Good morning, it's Richard from Love Brewing, and we're going to make some wine today. I'm really looking forward to spending a bit of time with you, showing you how we're going to produce our own wine. We've got two kits here that I brought today, which I think are great for starters, and we'll talk you through those. The first one we've got is the Wineworks Premium, and the second one is the Wineworks Superior. Both of them are designed for fairly quick drinking. What we try and do when we get you going at the start is we need to get some stock into you. So both these wine kits are designed for fairly quick making, 7, 10, 12 days, and then you'll be able to drink them fairly quickly afterwards. Once you've got a bit of stock in, then we can start looking at better quality wine kits, which obviously take much longer to be made. So we'll actually demo, we're going to do the Superior wine today, we're going to make that, but just before we go into that, I would just like to cover a couple of topics. Most important things when making wine, as with beer, as with everything, is cleanliness and temperature. If we can get those two right, it's very, very difficult to get a failure. So temperature, what we're looking for is we're looking for a nice room temperature, somewhere between 20 and 25, which is going to be ideal for our fermentation. Fermentation with these kits is going to be taking sort of 5 to 7 days, something like that. So we're looking for a constant temperature around that order. We don't want it fluctuating. We want to try and keep it nice and constant. Cleanliness. Well, everything that comes into contact with the wine needs to be sterilised. Obviously our equipment needs to be clean, but we also need to sterilise it. So we've got modern sterilisers, which are all included in the starter kits and obviously can be bought separately. The modern cleaners and sterilisers are used really in the brewers' pubs for cleaning the pipes and that type of thing. So they're very, very efficient. They're all chlorine based. So basically we just need to give it a real good sterilise and then rinse it with cold water afterwards. Okay, so let's just quickly look at the equipment we're going to use for fermenting. We've several options. We have a bucket, 25 litre bucket, nicely graduated on the outside. That's my personal preference, the bucket, but I'll run through the other options as well. We also have a 25 litre fermenter, again graduated on the side. This has a 4-inch neck. Obviously the bucket's got the big opening. This one's got a 4-inch neck, so we can still get our hand in to clean it. And the third option is a clear 23 litre carboy. Now, at this stage, we're going to start with a bucket, and with the majority of the starter kits we do the bucket and the fermenter. So let's look at the bucket and let's run through what we're going to do with that. I'll just move this out of the way for now. So the bucket, as I said, we need to sterilise. We need to sterilise the bucket and we need to sterilise everything that comes into contact with the wine. So our sterilising solution, all we're going to do is we need enough basically for 5 litres of water at the bottom. So we're going to take a tablespoonful of the steriliser, just sprinkle it in the bottom, and then nice if we can put hot water in. The steriliser seems to dissolve so much easier in hot water. So we can just run some hot water into the bucket. We'll run that until we've got 5 litres. Okay, so we've got 5 litres in the bucket, and all we're going to do is we're going to swirl it around the bucket so that it comes into contact with all sides of the bucket. And at the same time, we're going to put into the bucket things which we know are going to come into contact with the wine. So, what have we got? We've got a mixing spoon. We've got a hydrometer. We have a thermometer. We have our airlock. And we've got our bucket lid with the grommet. So I'm going to push those into the bucket. I'm going to put these in the bucket as well. And as before, I'm just going to keep swirling it round. So it comes into contact with all parts, and I'm going to repeat this process for the next 20 minutes. So while I'm doing that, we're going to stop the actual filming, and I'll let the steriliser do its work, and we'll be back in a minute. We've left it now 20 minutes. I'm just going to pour out all the sterilising solution from the bucket. I've still got the bits inside, so there's the thermometer, hydrometer. You can probably hear rattling away in there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to rinse it with some water to just get rid of all the chlorine-y smells that are there. And that's rinsing the buckets, the spoons, the hydrometer, thermometer, airlock and bucket lid. So again, I'll just pour that away. So just make sure anything that's come into contact with anything that's going to come into contact with the wine has had a really nice sterilisation, because that way you know everything's lovely and clean. That's great. So our equipment now is nicely sterilised, and we can have a little look at what we're going to do with the wine kit. This is the Superior, the Wineworks Superior. And in here we've got a sachet pack, which I'll run through in a minute, some extra grape juice, and we have the bag of grape juice. Now, it might be in this particular wine kit you have a choice of either a bag like this or one with a jerry can, a plastic container. So whichever one you get, do not panic, because obviously our juice comes from all over the world, and certain manufacturers have different types of facilities. So we've got in here the grape juice. We've got approximately 5 litres of grape juice and sugar blended, and we're going to take that and we're going to pour it into our wine, our bucket. So nicely unscrew. There's a pull rip cord here, which he says releasing nicely, and in she goes. It does actually take a little bit of practice, that. I know I'm sort of like probably made it look very, very easy, but I suppose I'm highly skilled at things like this. I wish. It does actually take a little bit of practice, so have a couple of goes before you actually pull the top off, because you can end up with grape juice all over the place, and that looks a bit messy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to add a little bit of hot water to that, because I want to rinse it out and I want to make sure we're not leaving any grape juice behind. So just a nice little rinse. Now with the Superior wine, we have a choice. We've got an extra sachet of grape juice. Now you can see that's slightly solidified in certain areas. That's all that is. It's the sugars from the grapes. Do not think it is anything else, because this is absolutely top quality grape juice. This is really, really expensive stuff, and it's why it makes this such a great wine kit. So the choice is, do we want a really dry wine or do we want a sweet wine? If we're wanting a dry wine, when I say really dry, it's sort of medium, anything up to medium, we can add this at the start. If we want a sweet wine, then let's leave this and we'll put it in at the end. But for the purposes of the exercise today, and probably because 75–80% of the people that buy this kit are looking for a dry wine, we're going to put this in at the start. So snip the corner on the sachet, and in she goes. And again, as I did with the other bag, I'm just going to put some water in here so that I can get all the last bits out. A little bit of hot water, so you can see. Let's just work it, work it, work it, and that's marvellous. So we've now got rid of that sachet, and we've now got to look at what else we're going to put in the wine kit. Now with this particular one, we've got obviously some yeast, but I'm going to add the yeast at the very end. We've also got on the Superior wine a choice of different types of sachets. Some oak chips, some elderflower. We have bentonite. Now some kits will include them and some won't, so please refer to your instructions on the actual kits, because as I say, some will and some won't. So because you haven't got any oak chips in yours, don't think it's missing. It's because that's the way the kit has been designed. But as a general rule on the Superior, we'll be using a toasted oak on the reds and a lighter oak on the whites. But that's, as I say, that's a general thing. But specifically, let's look at the actual individuals when they come along. So we've added any extra sachets into this. We've added either the oak, the bentonite or the elderflower, depending on what type of one we're making. And what we're going to do now is we're going to top up with ordinary water, and we're looking for a start temperature of between 20 and 25. So I'm rather fortunate because I suppose having made so many of these, I can just like feel the temperature and I know we're going to be somewhere near. So what I tend to do is I tend to get somewhere in the region of 20 litres in there, and my last 3 litres I will adjust depending on the temperature. With you, especially on your first go, keep your eye on the temperature. Keep mixing it and keep your eye on the temperature. You've got your big spoon, so you can give it a good stir as we're going along. And in your starter kit, you'll have your thermometer. So keep your thermometer and keep looking at that temperature, because it's important we get this right. We're looking for between 20 and 25 as our start temperature. Now, bearing in mind that this wine is going to get fermenting, it's not a problem touching it with your hand as long as you're nice and clean. Have a little taste of it as well, because it's absolutely gorgeous. It's got a lovely, lovely taste to it. And we're just going to keep mixing until we get somewhere near the right temperature. So, okay, we're now getting fairly close to the top. We're looking, as I say, for 23 litres on here, and my temperature was just starting to rise a little bit too much, so I'm now adding the final amount in cold water. As you can see, my start volume is 23, which is what we're looking for. 23 litres, that is. We're now just about ready. We're going to give it a nice good mix. And one final thing, before we add the yeast, to be honest, it doesn't matter if we've added the yeast, but I like to do it before. We've got our hydrometer. Now, what does a hydrometer do? Hydrometer measures the gravity of the liquid. So the more sugars that are in the liquid, that can be either granulated sugar, it can be sugar in the form of grape juice, because obviously the grapes have sugar inside them. It's anything that's going to increase the gravity. So for example, if we were using bananas or raisins or things like that, that would increase the gravity of the liquid. So we're going to drop this in and we're going to take a reading of the actual liquid. We're looking for somewhere in the region of 1070-ish. Might be 1075, might be 1080, might be 1068. We're going to drop that in the liquid, and we read across the liquid line. So the liquid line will tell us what the gravity of the must is. And in this case, we're looking at 1075, which is just a nice start gravity. You will also see the 2 reasons for doing this. You'll also see on the website how we can actually calculate the alcohol content of this wine when fermentation is finished. So that's the first reason we do it. The second reason, and far more important, is we need to know that fermentation is going to take place. So as fermentation takes place, what will happen is this will drop further and further and further into the liquid, and we'll end up at the end of fermentation with this hardly sticking out. Now, people say to me, how do you know fermentation's taking place? Well, there's several gauges. The first is that you'll see a very small amount of light bubbling coming through the liquid. Another thing you'll see is when we put the lid on and we've got the airlock, you'll see bubbles coming through the airlock. These are just gauges. The only surefire way to know that fermentation is taking place is by using this piece of equipment. This to me is like your dipstick on your car. You wouldn't go putting oil in your car unless you've checked your dipstick. This is just the same. We need to check this and make sure that it's doing the job. Don't worry as well about opening the lid during fermentation. People say to me, "Ooh, I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to see whether there was, I was being careful. I didn't want to get any infections in it." Yeah, that all makes sense. But while fermentation is taking place, gas is coming off the liquid. As gas comes off the liquid, it's very difficult to get any infection going that way because everything is coming this way. So don't worry about opening it. Don't worry about checking your hydrometer. That's good. It's all good practice. People say, what about stirring it? If you want to give it a stir, give it a stir. Doesn't matter as long as your equipment is clean and sterilised. Okay, so we've taken a reading What we're now going to do is add our yeast. Again, snip the corner, just sprinkle it in. This yeast has actually got a blend of nutrients in it as well, so that will make sure that the yeast actually feeds well. For those who don't know, yeast is absolutely fantastic. It's a wonderful, wonderful product. It's almost like a human being because it's got so many facets to it. What I'm doing now is I'm just folding this yeast into the liquid and making sure it's nicely dissolved. But yeast, what it does, it converts the sugar to alcohol. As it converts the sugar to alcohol, it will give off CO2. And as we've said on the hydrometer will start to drop further and further into the liquid because alcohol is thinner than water. So if we did a gravity reading on water using our hydrometer, it would be exactly 1,000. But alcohol that has been distilled or which has been fermented is probably well less than 1,000. So obviously the liquid, as the alcohol is produced, the liquid gets thinner and thinner, and that's why the hydrometer drops. So the yeast, we need to make sure with the yeast that it has a nice steady pattern to it. People say to me, oh, we've got a really good fermentation going today. It's popping away like mad, the airlock's going mental. My view is that's too hot. You're looking for a nice steady popping, plop plop, plop plop, plop plop. If you're getting more than that, you need to be looking at where you've got your fermentation taking place, because it's probably too hot. What we're going to do now is just going to put the lid on. Like so. This is our airlock, and the airlock wants to be half filled with water. So I don't know if you can see, the water line is here. It's half full, and as fermentation takes place, what will happen is the air will go up through here, pass through the water and out the airlock. The idea being that nothing can come back into the liquid, because obviously the gas is being given off and that goes through. What's the red cap for? Not necessary, you don't have to use it, but the advantage is that if you do actually get quite a vigorous fermentation, then this water will start to squirt and it could well cover your walls. So you don't want that to happen. So it's there really as a preventative measure, and it also stops any flies dropping in. So the airlock will go into position there. As I said to you earlier, remember that the fermentation, when it's taking place, will probably bubble through this airlock. But on certain occasions, the fermentation will actually come through the sides of the lid because it will find its easiest escape route. So it might be that the fermentation's there and no action is taking place on the airlock. So before you contact us to say the thing hasn't started, check it on your hydrometer. Remember, hydrometer is an absolute must for your winemaking. So let's have a little leave of this and let the fermentation take place.